it okay if you sit in the straw?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No problem. I might have to look at something here. Yeah.
If you wanted to mention it, it's on page 2.
Thank you. That comes later.
Yeah.
So you could mention it.
I thought you were going to go right into it.
No, I'm going into SI9, and then you take over.
Yeah.
And then I'll do the other 9. So I'll introduce SI9.
Yeah, it's right here.
Oh, you're right. I was thinking it was 123, page 2. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
I'm not ready.
No, you're not yet. You want to be able to hear. It's. Okay.
I guess one of the kids went off. Oh, right there, yeah. Where are we waiting?
Is this Oliver?
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, I would remind anyone with a cell phone to be sure that they are in the off or vibrate position. Good morning. On behalf of Home of Peace, it's my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Robert Elias, who will be officiating services for us. Rabbi? Oh, and Cantor Linder. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Cantor Nancy Linder from Temple Beth David. Today we are honoring the life of Dr. Paul Greenberg, who passed away just last Sunday at the age of 73. Paul was a devoted husband, father, grandfather, and esteemed cardiologist. Paul and his wife Diana have been members of Temple Beth David in Westminster since the early 1980s. Their children, George and Jamie, had their b'nai mitzvahs there, and over the years, we've enjoyed seeing them at our high holiday services with their extended family. In this time of unexpected loss, we seek guidance. From the Psalms, we find words of comfort. In Psalm 21, that you can find on page 2, 121, we lift our eyes up to the mountains, asking, where will we find help? The answer that our help comes from Adonai, from God. Hayim
lovely way to begin this service with heavenly music that make the angels sing along with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
With your kind permission, I'm going to stand over here. In Yiddish, we have a word for it. We call it being more Hainish, to get a little bit closer. But you can hear me okay in the back, right? Okay. I wanted to welcome you with two Hebrew words, and they are Bruchim Habayim, very loosely translated would mean, may God bless you for being here today, to do something very important, very significant. As a matter of fact, I believe there's only one word to describe your presence. You gather together at the end of a life. We hope today to accomplish two things. First and foremost, with dignity, with honor, with respect, some of our traditions, and mainly with a lot of love that you bring with you. We gather together to say to the citizen of the earth that part of your part remains behind on the earth. And when that fateful day comes, as it does for every person, wonderful people like you gather together to say to the citizen of the earth, rest in peace. It's a very kind and honorable thing to do. And if the only reason anybody came today is to say those few words, certainly that's a good enough reason to be here just to do that. But we also believe, when I say we, I mean every great religion in the world, all people of faith, whoever believes in God would also believe, refer to it as a spark of the divine, which when you think about it is quite lovely. More commonly, you'll hear the word spirit, which comes from the opening verses in the Bible. Before creation, it's written, the Spirit of the Lord hovers above the water. You hear that a lot when somebody you love is going through a difficult time in their life. Could be health-related, financially related, something stressful, and usually somewhat prolonged. And the people will call up and say, but how's his spirit holding up? That's that amazing human quality that somehow, when you see it, it's almost miraculously, they're able to keep moving inexorably forward when the life forces seem to be pulling them down. It's quite amazing when you see it. I have scientifically minded friends of mine who are much more skeptical. They believe in God, but they think it's some kind of power or electricity. That's what God is. And I say to them, that sounds fine to me. Nobody knows exactly what God is. That's good. But I don't think you'll be surprised that my favorite expression for that little piece inside of us is the Hebrew word neshama, which I guess you would translate as a soul. And if you've been around Jewish people for a while, especially if maybe their parents or maybe the grandparents, maybe they came from somewhere in Europe, they all had one thing in common. All those Eastern European countries, they spoke Yiddish. And if they wanted to compliment somebody at the highest possible level, and at the same time to do it very succinctly, all they had to say is, this person is a gift in the show. If it's so wonderful to be a good soul, what is a soul? Well, in today's vernacular, I would say it's God's DNA. Whatever God is, we believe a little piece of that, or today you would say a little chip, is given to every human being. So you are therefore a little bit of earth, a little bit of heaven blended together. It's a magnificent concept that by definition doesn't get old, doesn't get sick, cannot die, doesn't live here. It was just sent on for a blink 73 years on earth. And when the soul is finally free from that earthly bond that holds it, it also yearns to go home, back to the source from where it came. So what we're doing here today, actually many wonderful things, but most significantly is we've gathered together to escort a Gita Neshama, a good soul, on his journey home back to God. And I happen to think that that's about as good a definition of holiness as you'll ever find. And that's why we're here. It's easy to imagine, therefore, as Dr. Greenberg, as Paul's soul goes up to God, as his neshama goes up, that the master of the universe will hug him and welcome him home. I believe with a hug and with a kiss and say to him, my son, I'm very proud of you. You had a great life. And I would say by any yardstick, any way you want to measure, it was a great life. We wish it could have been a little longer, but in the time that he had, he accomplished great things. First of all, it's time to pause and to say thank you that we're able to still see a man and a woman today together in love and working together and creating a life and a family and contributing to the welfare of humanity. So I think it's worthwhile just to say thank you for those wonderful years. And then you realize that he was able to do something very significant. You know, going back for a couple thousand years, some of the greatest Jewish people that ever lived became doctors. Like, the one that comes to mind immediately is Maimonides. The Rambam was a great physician almost 1,000 years ago. He was way ahead of his time. And so they became doctors. And so the question, and the best among us, the brightest. And the question, of course, is why? Well, there is a wonderful line in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, in the portion called Beshalach, where God says to Moses, he's quoting, and he says, if you will keep my commandments and obey my ordinances, and do all the things that you are required to do, all the diseases and maladies I placed upon the Egyptians, I shall not place them upon you. Why? Ki ani Adonai rofecha. I am the Lord, your physician, your doctor, your healer. And so God considers himself our healer, our physician. And therefore, every day when we pray in the morning, we have in the what's called the Shemona Esrei, the prayer of 18 benedictions. One of them is we ask the healer to heal us. So it's really wonderful when God will welcome Dr. Greenberg and say to him, my son, I'm very proud of you. You're a doctor for about 40 years, and you helped a lot of people, improved a lot of lives. I know my relationship with my cardiologist is quite special. He takes really good care of me. And so we're very, very grateful that he was able to do God's work. And of course, the Talmud talks a lot about doctors, and we are told that doctors have a very special place in the hierarchy in God's heaven. And so I wanted to tell you a quick little story. In the morning prayer book, we say, these are the things that you eat the fruit in this world, but the principle remains for the world to come. And then it gives a list. And what we're doing here today is on the list, Levayat Emet, to come to a funeral. It's very, very holy and important. It's a huge mitzvah. I wanted to tell it to you the way I would tell it in my congregation. We believe and we teach that every human being, every person has a bank account, your own savings account in heaven. And every time you do a mitzvah, a good deed, you're making a deposit into your own heavenly account. And people don't realize how often we do good deeds, because we do it automatically. Little ones, big ones. You open the door after you. It's not a big deal, but it's a mitzvah. It's nice. You say to somebody, have a nice day. God bless you after you sneeze. Hundreds of things we do automatically all the time. We don't realize we've sent them into our heavenly bank book. When you give a donation to somebody, when you encourage somebody, once in a while we catch ourselves saying to somebody, you know, I know you're going through a hard time. Don't give up. Hang in there and things will improve for you. You've given that person the amazing gift of hope. You cannot live without hope. The Israeli national anthem is called Hatikva, the hope. And you've sent it into your heavenly bank account. And sometimes I really believe the only things we keep in life are all the things we've given away. And they're waiting for us in our heavenly bank account. So I thought it would be wonderful to say, dear Lord, your son is coming home after a wonderful life. A life of love and service, family, community. Look at all the mitzvahs, all the good deeds that he did for his family, for his friends, for his patients, to make the world a little bit better through his unique contribution to it. Open his bank account and see what he sent ahead, and he will be a very wealthy man in heaven. And that gives us tremendous comfort on a difficult day. And then, of course, to your mom, you know, I'm so sorry she couldn't be here. But I hope you will be able to convey a message to her from me. And I hope you will be able to tell her that she has a mitzvah to do now, and that's to recover and to be strong. And to be here a long time, because there's 3 little kids, 3 little grandchildren. And your dad couldn't be here to watch them become bar mitzvah, but your mom maybe can. And we encourage her to be able to be strong and to be here and to take the years that your dad didn't get, and she should take them, and that would make him happy. And I think, not now and not during Shiva, and maybe not during Shloshim, the 30 days of mourning, maybe after that, if one day she will be able to look up and to say, my love, I'm okay, I think it would make him very happy in heaven. And I think that would be a wonderful gift that she would be able to give him, so that he can be at ease and at peace in heaven, that the people he loves the most are going to be okay. I wanted to tell you a quick story. You know, in my congregation, I tell a lot of stories. And the reason is, about 10 years ago, I realized that when people go home on Shabbat and somebody says, what did the rabbi talk about? Most people say, I don't remember. And to be honest with you, a week later, I don't remember either way. But if you tell them a story, I said, they remember. So I started telling lots of stories. I know hundreds of stories. I want to tell you, well, I'll just tell you one story that comes actually from a little book called Pirkei Avot, the Sayings of Our Fathers. There was a great rabbi who lived about 1,800 years ago, and he was very famous for one thing. He could answer every question. They could never stump him. And so naturally, his students delighted in trying to stump him. So one day they came to him and they said, can you tell us the difference between this world and the next world, which you would imagine would not be possible to do. But here's how he answered it. He said, this world, as beautiful as it can be, and I'm talking about the furniture in the world, right? The beautiful things that God created for us, the grass. And do you ever notice, sometimes when you're outside and you look and you see miles of grass. Or if you look on a clear day, you can see the mountains 20 miles away. It's amazing what the human eye can do. Somebody once asked me, why do you believe in God? And I said, how much time do you have? I'll give you 100 reasons. And one of them was the human eye. It's amazing what the human eye can do. There's no camera that can do what your eye does. There's thousands of rods and cones working in direct proportion with each other so that you will be able to see. It adjusts for distance. It takes the image and puts it right side up. It sees in color. It's self-cleaning. I mean, it's amazing, the human eye. I don't believe any amount of evolutionary time could have created something as perfect as a human eye. And so when you look and you see all that grass, you know, there's a wonderful line in the Talmud that says, and you don't take this literally, but the lesson is quite clear. The Talmud says, even a blade of grass cannot grow, except that God sends an angel to stand over it and to say, grow. Obviously, the lesson is, if God is concerned about a blade of grass, can you imagine his concern and love for you, for a human being? And so this great sage said, and when you see all that grass, and then you see a tree, when you look very closely at a tree, you can almost see God's fingerprint on that tree. There was a wonderful poem written by Joyce Kilmer, and the last 2 lines were, poems are written by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. It's quite lovely. The majestic mountains, some of them, they seem to touch the sky. The power, the vastness of the oceans, and all that it contains. And you realize God created all of that to furnish our home before he put us into it. And yet this great sage said that all that beauty, all that magnificence can be compared to just a corridor. He calls it a closed door. A corridor. Prepare yourself in the time that you're given in the corridor, that one day you will enter the banquet hall. That's how he saw the difference. And so today, there is sadness. When you lose somebody so precious, so dear, so wonderful, somebody who contributes to the welfare of humanity, somebody who's a great husband, wonderful father and grandfather, a good friend to so many. When you lose somebody like that at such a young age, it's a terrible loss. But we want for a moment today to be able to mitigate that loss and to celebrate his life, a life of tremendous accomplishment, a life of giving and loving and kindness. And we want to be able to celebrate, at least for a few minutes today, that he enters the banquet hall to reunite with loved ones. And then, my dear friend, when you think that it can't get any better than when the master of the universe, when God says to him, my son, I'm proud of you, you did a great job while you were on earth, there's a great reward waiting for you. Can't get any better than that. And then it gets better. Because when God opens his arms, they're waiting for him, will be his parents. People who loved him, who went before. Because we believe that souls that loved each other on earth, we believe they find each other again in the world of reward. That one door closes, the door to life on earth, and another door to a greater realm, to life eternal opens. That is our compensation in life. And we have faith in the Almighty that he will give us that reward when the time comes. Our goal is to delay that time as long as possible, and to be here in this wonderful world that he created for us as long as possible. You can imagine, for all these reasons that I've explained to you, how wonderful it is not just to live a great life, but to leave a great legacy. And so, you know, when I was speaking with the family, they were telling me that there were many wonderful charities, and it's in your book, you know, that on the back, you can see it, they asked for donations in Paul's name to the American Heart Association. But even more than that, your mom and dad, they founded a scholarship in a medical school for the last 20 years to help somebody have an easier time to go and become a doctor as well. And so that lives on. It's really amazing. Did you ever notice good people who have been tremendously blessed by God, who are productive and giving, who feel really that the blessings from God have come to them over and over, constantly in their lives. Good people like that, they have this tremendous need to give back something, to do something good, to show gratitude. And so that's what your parents were able to do, to create that kind of a scholarship at the level that they believe was the blessing that God gave to them. And that's what we celebrate today as well. For all these reasons, it's very, very difficult for people from the family to be able to speak, which is why I wanted you to know it's not required or expected, but whenever we have somebody able to do that from the family, I always think of it as a profile in courage. And by way of introduction, the Gemara, the Talmud, tells about a son in 3 Aramaic words. You can say, a son is a reflection of his father and the apple of the eye of his mother. And for a daughter, twice as good. I have 2 daughters, and I can tell you, there's nothing like a daughter. They're so wonderful. You remember there used to be an old saying, a son is a son until he takes a wife. But a daughter is a daughter for life. So it's so wonderful to have a son and a daughter. It's my pleasure to call upon George to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. That was beautiful. Dad, I cried when I wrote this, and I cried when I practiced it trying not to cry. And I'm sure I'm going to cry reading it today. Dad, I'm going to eulogize you today as if I'm talking to you, even though I know you're not here, well, at least for part of it. Dad, my dear Dad, want to know what kind of a dad you were to me? I'll tell you. You were the kind of dad who woke me up early the day before the SAT exam, made me get in the car and do a practice drive so I knew exactly how to get to the exam center on time and without getting lost on the real day. You were the kind of dad who grabbed me when I was leaving on school overnight trips and stuffed extra money in my pockets, told me, here's emergency cash just in case you needed it, even though I'm sure I had plenty. The guy who sat me down on orientation day of college and read the thick booklet that nobody reads with all the courses and rules and requirements for graduating and drew 8 boxes on one sheet of paper within the hour and laid out the names of each suggested class for each semester in college. A sure roadmap and a plan so I would graduate, all mapped out just in case I needed it. And indeed, I took most of those classes, Dad. Dad was the guy who, when I was sick, had the answer for everything. He was a doctor, so there was a safety net in his arms when I was 6 years old and throwing up at the toilet, shaking and shivering and thinking I was surely going to die. He and my mom would take turns holding my head and assuring me I wasn't going to die. Since he was a doctor, of course, he had something in his drawer called Epicac syrup, just in case his kid swallowed Drano or some other poison and he needed to treat it. He had his little black doctor bag and his stethoscope and would listen to our heart and the sounds in our stomachs, and he had the big wooden tongue depressors where he would make us say, ah, and look in the back of our sore throats. He had that little hammer with a rubber head he would hit us on our knee to make our leg involuntarily kick so we would giggle. And let's not forget the thing to look in our ears. It was all our dad. As a doctor, he snuck me into patients' rooms and asked, hey, do you mind if my son watches this procedure? I got to watch some pretty amazing things, see x-rays, all kinds of stuff I could hardly pronounce at that age. People would say, wow, you are Dr. Greenberg's son? You know he's an amazing doctor and he helped my mom, my dad, my wife, or my husband. People would ask my dad all kinds of medical questions. Patients would come up to us at tables in restaurants and say hi. To me, it didn't dawn on me until years later the impact he really had on other people's lives. He was just dad. Back then, to me, he being a doctor just meant me getting to go to the doctor's cafeteria or the coffee shop at the hospital, where I could use his code and get a cheeseburger and a milkshake while he was seeing a patient on a Saturday. Then on those Saturdays, oftentimes after the hospital, we'd go get a haircut at the barber shop, where the guy, of course, had Playboy magazines, and my dad would remind me, don't tell your mother. We'd go to the car wash and watch the guys detail the car. We'd go to Thrifty's, and he'd get me chocolate mint or chocolate chip ice cream, still my 2 favorite flavors today. We'd go to the bank and deposit checks and get cash. He'd take me to the safety deposit box and show me all kinds of cool stuff he had inside. Back then he had bonds that you had to clip a little piece of paper off called a coupon. Then we'd walk it over to the teller and deposit it, and she said, here's your interest. That was cool. He'd show me his grandmother's wedding ring, his late father's pen. To me, it was just adventurous stuff, checking out stuff with Dad. He let me store my first silver dollar there. We opened up my first checking account and savings account as well. He'd take me to the pool store for chlorine for the pool, the dry cleaners to pick up his shirts. We'd go to 76 Station, where back then it was all full service, and the guys would check the oil, the air in the tires, and bring the bill to the window to sign. He'd take my sister and me to McDonald's. We'd get cheeseburgers and fries. Of course, we fed the pigeons fries and laughed and giggled with an innocence and zero care in the world, except for being in the moment with having fun with Dad. One day we went to the park, and my sister wandered too close to 2 geese, and they saw the cheeseburger she was waving over her little body and decided it was their lunch. Quickly snatched the cheeseburger and left my sister crying like crazy. Dad, of course, gave his cheeseburger to her and made it all better. Dad had a big maroon-colored Cadillac, one of those big, long versions. I remember we drive up to Dodger Stadium to go to the games and eat in the stadium club. My sister and I mostly would miss half the game eating big pieces of chocolate cake and vanilla ice cream, and back then, Cherry's Jubilee with the big fire on top. It was cool. We'd get autographs and we'd fall asleep in the car ride home and get carried to bed by Dad. And to this day, this is why I enjoy taking my own kids to Dodger Stadium. My dad taught my sister and me how to play poker. I remember sitting on the floor in the family room, 5-card draw, 7-card stud. My dad would hold the back of my bicycle when the training wheels came off and run along to teach me to balance. I screamed and he would let me go, but he taught me to blast off. I must have been around 6. He'd take me up to the college near our house where I would watch him jog on the track, or we'd play some tennis on their tennis courts, where I mostly would hit the ball over the fence just for fun to watch my dad chase it. My dad was the kind of guy who tried going on a Cub Scout camping trip with me so we didn't miss out, but my dad was not a camping guy. Definitely didn't want to sleep in a tent, had allergies like crazy. Actually, both of us did. We had allergy pills, allergy inhalers, even EpiPens just in case. We went on one trip, and I remember there were awful smelling horses, wet hay, and we were both sneezing like crazy. Nighttime came, everyone was getting ready for bed, and my dad took me to the bathroom, which was a smelly outhouse. We opened the door and found the hole jammed with toilet paper, a mess everywhere, and that left one outhouse for the rest of the 80 people. And my dad turned to me and said, "How about we drive home, George? We can be there in 20 minutes, we'll sleep in our comfy beds, and no one will know, and we'll come back early for pancakes." So we did. Oh man, I remember all kinds of fun times with Dad. I remember we went to Hawaii one time and stayed in a place called the Pink Palace, he used to call it. It was the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. It was cool, it was right on the beach. Cutting a couple things out to make this shorter. Dad and I took father and son golf lessons, and that didn't last very long. He wasn't a golfer, and neither was I. My dad was one of the most hardworking people I will ever know. His father died when he was young. His mom, my grandmother, was a nurse, but didn't work when my dad and his brother, Robert, who is also here today, were young. She and he would tell me she sacrificed to keep them on the straight and narrow. She was committed to providing them with a good education, both Jewish and otherwise, and would schlep them both to Hebrew school at Wilshire Boulevard, where they became close with Rabbi Magnin, who I think is also buried in this cemetery just outside. My dad told me 1,000 times. My dad went on, worked hard, and eventually finished USC for his undergrad in 2.5 years, and rushed off to medical school, where he met my mom in Arkansas and start to begin building a life together. I'm pretty sure my sister and I were born on account of my mom, though. The way she tells it, she threw out her birth control pills and said, "We're having kids now." My dad said we sure put a stop to his wine and cigars, but I think he was really joking. But he did teach me to smoke my first cigar from his pre-kid stash in his humidor. My dad was such a committed father. He worked so hard to make sure our family was comfortable. My dad was also a committed husband. As the rabbi mentioned, this September would have been my parents' 50th anniversary. Even towards the end, he was asking the doctors, "Do you think I can squeeze out just a little more time to make it to our 50th in September?" My parents were always a team together, taking care of each other. He loved his 3 grandsons too, would call them every Shabbat and to check in and say Shabbat Shalom. Ask them about their day, what they're learning in school, which they never remembered. And he was so excited to get the daily texts and the photos to see what the grandkids were up to. My dad knew everything about everything. He was an encyclopedia of knowledge. Whenever Oliver would ask a question and neither Rebecca nor I knew the answer, we would say, "Let's just call Grandpa. I know he will know." And he always did. In addition to medicine, he knew about history, countries, presidents, science, the Torah, family tree stuff, even about everyone buried in this cemetery. And not just our family, but the fact that the 3 Stooges were buried here. And we used to love watching, which we used to love watching when we were kids. He even showed me their graves. I wish I had paid more attention when Dad showed me where all our relatives are buried around here. Dad, I could go on and on all day about how wonderful a man you were, but I better find a place to come to an end so that we can move along with this day and get you laid to rest. To watch you these past 5 to 6 weeks become so sick was heart-wrenching to me. It was my greatest honor to be at your side in the hospital, to shave you with an electric razor, to spoon you applesauce, to hold a cup of water with a straw for you to have a little sip of water, to feed you ice chips, and to do suction on your mouth, as you used to call it, before you lost your voice. And to put in your eye drops 4 times a day, 2 of one and 1 of another, as you'd say, to help you brush your teeth, even when you only had 2 little bites of lunch. You insisted on brushing your teeth. To be with you via the iPad on FaceTime when I couldn't be there. I'm so grateful I got a chance to tell you how much I loved you and to say goodbye. I hope you didn't suffer too much or too long trying to hang in there just a little while longer, hoping things might turn the corner. And it's a great honor today to eulogize you and bring you to your final resting place, a place you've taken us to 1,000,000 times over the years. I'm only so sad that today it's you. And I'm sad I wish Mom was here with us too, instead of at Long Beach Memorial Hospital. She fell night before last in the middle of the night and was banged up pretty badly, requiring plastic surgery on her face. But she's stable. But the weirdest thing is not having you here to deal with all the doctors and the hospital stuff. We miss you so much. Dad, you were the kind of guy who always cared, always loved, always was patient, always. I talk to you, my dad, my father, my friend, every day of my life. It will sure be a different thing to get used to not being able to do that anymore. But I love you ever so dearly. Dad, you were my hero, the best dad a son could ever have. And I love you today and to eternity. May you rest in peace, and may your memory always be a blessing for us all. Amen.
Thank you very much. It's just a very beautiful tribute. I think your father would be very happy that the people he loved so much return that love and honor him so much. It's been said that when you pray, you're talking to God. And when you read the Bible, God is talking to you. So we find ourselves in constant dialogue with our Creator. And one of the greatest prayers we have on page 4 and 5 is Psalm 23, Tehillim, written by King David. I think it's unsurpassed in its beauty and eloquence and its clinging and love to the Creator. 23 is among many, many, many great ones. It's probably the most famous one. And I once wrote 10 pages describing this psalm from the Hebrew. I use this psalm when I'm counseling young people, mostly boys who are going through a difficult time in their life. We go for a walk. It takes about an hour to describe this psalm, line by line. And when they hear it, they feel much better. I want to give you just like a 2-3 minute taste, not the hour, but a few minutes. David was a shepherd, and naturally, when he thinks of himself, he thinks that maybe there is a divine shepherd, so he sees God as his shepherd. And if you have God as your shepherd, then everything is being very well taken care of. I shall not lack anything. Lo echsar. Nothing is missing if God is your shepherd. What's God doing for me? Well, he makes me lie down in green. Very important where you lay down your head, that the shepherd is watching to make sure you're not attacked in your sleep. What if I'm thirsty? He leads me beside still waters. Okay, so I give him that. What is he doing for me spiritually? He restoreth my soul. So God is taking care of you both inside and outside. Okay, and up to there, it's a pretty good poem, right? It's a nice, beautiful, lovely tribute to God. But the middle line seems incongruent, doesn't seem to belong here. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow. Gam ki elech begates al movet. If the Lord is your shepherd, how is it possible for you to be in the valley of the shadow of death? What shepherd leads his flock into the valley of death? So what's King David trying to say? It's very, very meaningful. What David is saying is, no matter who you are, how much you love God, at some point in your life you will experience sadness, sorrow, loss, depression. And what happens when you feel that? Many people feel that God has abandoned them. Why does God hate me? He doesn't hate you. He must hate me if I'm in this terrible place. So now you're in the valley of the shadow of death. What do you want to know? When you ask people that, or even if they're on a psychiatrist's couch, you know what they say? I want to know, what did I do to deserve to be in this terrible place? That's most of the people. But King David counsels otherwise. Really what David is saying is, it's not your fault that you're in this terrible place. God doesn't hate you. And it doesn't matter why you're here. The only thing that matters is how do you get out of here? And David gives you the secret to life in 2 lines. The first line is, I will fear no evil. Most people in a bad place, they become paralyzed with fear. And so David says, don't be afraid. And we say, David, why shouldn't I be afraid? Look where I am. I'm in the valley of the shadow of death. Why shouldn't I be afraid? And he tells you, because you are with me. Ki ata imadi, you are with me. Don't feel abandoned when you have sorrow, because not only has God not abandoned you, but he's closer to you now than he's ever been before. How do you know that? When you look at the grammar in the psalm, in the Hebrew as well as the English, it begins in the third person. The Lord is my shepherd. He, right? He makes me lie down. He leads me beside someone. He restores my soul. But when I'm in the valley of the shadow of death, it doesn't say I will fear no evil, for he is with me. But it says because you, first person, ki ata, you are with me. So God has changed into your personal God, to a you. And that's the first thing. And once you can understand that and live that and believe that, then you can come to the next line. And David says to you, your rod and your staff, shiftechu mishantecha, your rod and your staff, they, how would you end that sentence? If you didn't know how David wrote it, what would you say? Your rod and your stick, they hit me, they frighten me, they scare me. Who says your stick is comforting to me? Sheep say that. Because when the shepherd is holding his staff, he's not hitting the sheep. He's guiding them to safety. He's warding off wolves and other predators who want to harm the sheep. So metaphorically speaking, if you think you see the staff of God, don't be afraid. He's your divine shepherd. He's not going to hit you. He's guiding you to where you're supposed to be, even before you know it yourself. And once you've understood these 2 things, look how beautifully everything flows after that. Your whole life changes. You prepare a table before me. You anoint my head. My cup runs over. Goodness and mercy follow me all the days. Can you imagine a person like King David, who suffered so much in his life? He was constantly at war. He had trouble in his own family. He had a son, Absalom, who wanted to kill his own father. He had wives who hated him. He had probably depression in his life. Who knows how low he could have. Can you imagine somebody of this caliber who can say nothing terrible, all these things? Goodness and mercy every day of my life. We want to be like that. That's why we love this song. King David gives us the formula to life. And I'm so happy to be able to call upon Cantor Linder to sing them for us, page 4 and 5.
Adonai Roi lo echsar bino desheya biseni al mi minuchot yeraleini nafshi yeshovev yanchini b'magelei tzedek yanchini b'magelei tzedek leman גם כי לך בהגיע צל מוות לא יירא, כי אתה עמדי. שיב לך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפניי שולחן נגד צורני. דשנת ושמן ראשי כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, כל ימי חיי. ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני רואי לא אחסר, אדוני רואי לא אחסר.
Would you please join me? Let us read together on page 5 this wonderful psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And that is our prayer for Paul, for Dr. Greenberg. May he receive a great, great reward. May he be privileged to dwell in the house of the Lord in a place of honor with his loved ones forever. And if you'll turn to the back, there's a prayer known as the memorial prayer on page 12. Would you please rise?
אל מלא רחמים שוכן במרומים, המסי מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה. עם קדושים וטהורים כזוהר רקיע, מזהירים את נשמת פרס בן גורשן ורות שהלך לעולמו. בעל הרחמים יסתירו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרו בצרו החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו. וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר Amen.
And to his family, to his beloved, to Diana, to George and Rebecca, to Jamie, Robert and Julia. Especially I want to say to the grandchildren. We're told grandchildren are just as beloved by their grandparents as they love their own children. And not only do I believe that, but I would even go further and I would say if it's humanly possible to love someone even more than you love your children, it's the love of grandparents for grandchildren. It's indescribably delicious. It's magical, it's wonderful. And so for Oliver and Henry and Paul, the grandchildren, and to his family and friends, it's my great honor to be able to read these words, to escort truly a wonderful soul, a gute neshama, on his journey home back to God. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of your presence, among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament, unto the soul of Dr. Paul Stanley Greenberg, Peretz, the son of Gershon and Ruth, who has gone to his eternal home, and in whose memory you've all gathered to remember him with love, and in whose memory charity will be donated, which I'm sure would make him very happy. But even more importantly, for the so many good deeds that he performed in his own lifetime, we all pray, dear God, may his repose be in paradise. May the Lord of mercy bring him under the cover of his wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. May the Lord be his possession, and may his repose be forever peaceful. And let us say, Amen. Please be seated.
On behalf of the family and Home of Peace, we'd like to thank Rabbi Robert and Cantor Nancy for officiating services here in our chapel, and we invite you all to Cripside, where interment services will continue. Following the interment, the family would kindly invite you to Parker's Lighthouse on Shoreline Village Drive in Long Beach to share in some refreshments. At this time, I'm going to ask the gentlemen serving as pallbearers to come forward, who will pay their respect in a group, and then we're going to all escort Dr. Paul to his place of final rest. So may I please have the pallbearers. Gentlemen, ladies, can I have you on this side? We're going to go this door over here. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be escorting the casket behind the family, so I'm going to ask the immediate family to come up, and I'm going to ask you to all...
Okay, walking in the middle so you can hear me. I know we're the most, and his friend should be here as he's laid to rest. It should not be strangers who come and do it later. And then when you think you're doing something completely selfless, you actually get a reward. And the reward is when we leave here today, nobody, especially not the family, will have to wonder, did I leave something out? I never heard that word. We were using the Hebrew word shalom, which comes from the root, the Hebrew root shalem, which means to be whole, to be complete, much more than closure. Because people who feel whole have shalom, they are at peace. And that's why we do it. You notice we had a little earth. Whenever we're not at a grave where we can shovel earth, we need to put something from the earth on top of the casket. Because the Bible says we come from the earth God creates us, has to be earth associated with our return. And so we have a little, at Home of Peace, they have a little bag of earth from Israel, from the holiest burial site for the Jewish people called the Mount of Olives. If you've been to Israel, you know from the Mount of Olives you can see the old city, you can see the temple, the Western Wall, the Dome of the Rock, for the Muslims. It's a very lovely place. And we had the family put some earth on top of the casket. And as soon as the grand screw comes, we're going to place the casket and make a blessing. And then we're going to do what indigenous populations were doing 3,300 years ago when we got to Torah. They were actually scarring themselves when they lost a loved one to show the pain of losing somebody you love. We're not allowed to do that, so the Orthodox, they tear their suit lapel. But in our movement, we believe that we're $1,000 smarter than that. And so we use a ribbon. And children wear it on the left side near the heart. Other relatives would wear it on the right side. And if you are wearing the ribbon, you're supposed to be sitting. And the blessing is, it is our great God who gives life, and we're very grateful when God is also the one to choose the time to take back that which always belonged to God, but was only lent to us for a short time. It's a time we're together for which we are so grateful that we say, Yehi Shem Adonai Barak. May God's great name be praised for infinitely enriching our lives by the relationships that we're privileged to have along the way. And now we're going to cut the ribbon. So the three of you wearing the ribbon, would you please rise? And repeat after me. Baruch, all together. Baruch, atah, Adonai, Eloheinu, Melech, Haolam, Dayan, Koheles. And what you said is, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, the true judge. And this family stands up on a difficult day, basically to say thank you to God for all the blessings that He sent to you in the past with faith and hope that God will continue to bless your family in the future. And ladies and gentlemen, if you would please rise one final time, we're going to be saying the mourner's Kaddish. You can find it on page 8 or 9. And as the family and I say the Kaddish together, if you would like to participate, you can do so by answering Amen, Amen, at all the proper places. You can see them in bold, the Amen parts, okay? You ready? Amen. Please be seated for 1 minute. It's only after that prayer we're allowed to say words of comfort to the family. So on behalf of all the wonderful people here today, you're so blessed. Yet when sorrow came into your life, you have so many people who want to be with you on this difficult day. And so from all of us, we say to you words of comfort we've been saying to each other literally for thousands of years in an unbroken chain of tradition. May our great, loving, and merciful God comfort you from this loss, even as He does for those people who mourn in Zion and in Jerusalem. And we hope the future for you will be infinite and filled with much, much happiness and not sorrow. And we're going to conclude the service the way we began, with music and song. Beautiful, beautiful words to conclude this lovely service. We call once again on Cantor Liddell.
Thank you, Rabbi. Join together in the Song for Peace, O Say Shalom. O say Shalom b'mona, Uyase Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru, Imru, Amen. Yase Shalom, Yase Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Yase Shalom, Yase Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yase Shalom, Yase Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yase Shalom, Yase Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yase Shalom, Yase Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
Shalom, everybody. Honored to be with you. We hope we meet in the future only on happy occasions. Shalom.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the family, we wish to thank the cantor and the rabbi for officiating services not only in our chapel but here at Graveside, for the kindness of our pallbearers for their assistance, and for the many acts of kindness you've all shown the family. Once again, the family would kindly invite you to Parker's Lighthouse at 435 Shoreline Village Drive in Long Beach to share in some refreshments. Thank you. This concludes our services.
So literally next door. What can you just say that? Yeah. So I'm in the two-story house on that part. So so on the same side, it's not on Mr. Gibson, so the other corner is. Yeah, exactly. So I just want to reach out.
Play tennis. I used to play that. Like, it was either my son's pretty good at it. I might make sure too hard to do for kids. And again, just caring what it is. Absolutely. I hate it when you get snow and then
Yeah, I think you've been
I wear gym shorts every day.